Hello everyone. I wanted to take a little bit of a time to go over some of the connective tissues for this unit. I thought this would be a good one for me to focus on because connective tissue is one of the most diverse. There are several different types of connective tissue in the body. So consider this a little mini lecture just as an extra resource for you. Connective tissues will function to bind organs together. Others will provide support or fill spaces. Some will produce blood cells, others may store fat. So again, very diverse not only in structure but in function. Generally, connective tissue cells are separated by a matrix. Now the matrix can vary in consistency from a solid to something jelly-like, and the space between the cells will also vary with the type of connective tissue. The rest of the space is going to be covered with the cells and fibers. There are three different main types of fibers that you could see in connective tissue. White collagen fibers, which provide flexibility and strength. Reticular fibers, which are thinner collagen fibers that are branched. And then yellow elastic fibers, which are made of the protein elastin. So you have collagen and elastin both in these fibers that you'll see in connective tissues. The first connective tissue that I want to discuss is loose fibrous and dense fibrous. So this one on this slide is loose fibrous, and another word for this is areolar. It supports epithelial tissues and internal organs. You'll find it in the lungs, arteries, the urinary bladder. It forms a protective covering around muscles, blood vessels, and nerves. And you can see why we call it loose connective tissue. It's because there's a lot of space in between the fibers and the cells here, as opposed to dense fibrous. So look at the difference in that one and this one. Dense fibrous is made of collagen fibers, and they're very closely packed together. So you can see there's not a lot of matrix here that you can see. So dense as opposed to loose. This makes up tendons, which connect muscle to bone, and ligaments, which connect bone to bone. Next we have adipose. This is probably one of the easier ones to identify. Adipose is another word for fat. These are big white globular cells called adipocytes. And the body will use the stored fat for insulation, can break it down for energy as needed, and for protection and cushioning of the organs. Reticular connective tissue forms the supporting network of lymphoid tissue in your lymph nodes. Also found in the spleen, the thymus, and the bone marrow. So reticular connective tissue. Cartilage, and there are several types of cartilage, is a specialized form of dense fibrous, which forms the smooth surfaces that allow bones to slide against one another in joints. So it cushions the bones. You'll find these, of course, in all of your joints. You'll find it in the vertebral column, in between the vertebrae. This cartilage can also be found in the nose and the ears. It lies in small chambers called lacunae, and these are separated by a solid matrix. So even though it is flexible as cartilage, it is a solid matrix as opposed to a jelly-like substance. Chondrocytes, as you can see in the diagram, is the name of a cartilaginous cell, and then you can see how they're contained in the lacunae. So for the first type of cartilage, you'll see this one's hyaline, and on the right of the screen you can see a photomicrograph of the hyaline cartilage. This is the most common type. It's found in the nose and at the ends of long bones and the ribs. It also forms the rings in the walls of your respiratory passages, so those primary bronchi. This is also the one that forms the fetal skeleton, and then most of that is replaced later by bone during development. Elastic cartilage, as the name implies, will have more elastic fibers, and it's much more flexible. So this is found in the framework of the outer ear, for example. And the last type of cartilage is fibrocartilage. It has strong collagen fibers. It is found in places that are going to have a lot of tension, a lot of friction, a lot of pressure, such as the pads between the vertebrae and the backbone, and also the meniscus in the knee joint. Bone is also a type of connective tissue. Now, if we are talking about a bone, like the femur, then of course that would be considered an organ in our levels of organization. But we're talking about the tissues that make up that bone. And so we're calling this connective tissue bone as well. And there are two types. There's compact bone and then there's spongy bone as far as tissues go. The one you see in the diagram here, this is considered compact bone. It makes up the shaft of a long bone, and it consists of cylindrical structures called osteons. The central canal of each osteon will be surrounded by concentric rings of hard matrix, and bone cells are located in spaces called lacunae between the rings of that matrix. So one of the types of tissues you will find in a bone is compact bone connective tissue. In the central canal, nerve fibers will carry impulses and blood vessels carry nutrients that will allow the bone to renew itself. So the nutrients can reach all of the bone cells because they're connected with these tiny little canals called canaliculi. And I kind of like that word. It's kind of fun to say, canaliculi. You can see them in the diagram here. Oh, that's not a pretty color. Let's try something else. Canaliculi there that connects all of them, allowing them to provide nutrients to all parts of the bone tissue. Spongy bone is the other type of bone tissue, and you can see this looks much different than the compact bone. It contains numerous bony bars and plates that are separated by irregular spaces, and this is found on the ends of long bones. And although it is considered spongy bone, it has a lot of space in it, it is very, very strong. It is still designed for strength. It does help keep the skeleton more lightweight than if it were made completely of compact bone. The last tissue I want to talk about is blood, and sometimes we don't think about blood as being a tissue, but if you remember, the definition of a tissue is cells working together for a common function. Blood is a tissue, even though it's more like a liquid. The matrix is not made by the cells here. The matrix is called plasma, and the blood transports nutrients and oxygen to an interstitial fluid and removes carbon dioxide and wastes. It also helps to distribute heat, plays a role in fluid, ion, and pH balance, and protects from disease and injury by the clotting factors. So plasma is the liquid component of blood. It makes up about 55% of the volume of the whole blood. Red blood cells are called erythrocytes. White blood cells, leukocytes, and platelets are also known as thrombocytes, and they make up the other 45%. So it's about half and half. So you can see here the three types of cells, erythrocytes, leukocytes, and thrombocytes, all work together to form this tissue called blood. And you can see in this diagram here, the red blood cells here and here, erythrocytes, the plasma is labeled, and then white blood cells. See how much bigger the white blood cells or lymphocytes are than the red blood cells? Those are going to be the ones that help to fight against infection. Red blood cells are small. They are biconcave, meaning they're kind of sunk in on both sides. And they carry hemoglobin, which is a protein that helps to distribute oxygen throughout the body. Now, normal red blood cell does have this biconcave shape, but in diseases such as sickle cell anemia, the protein in the blood is misshapen, causing the blood cell to be misshapen, and therefore it can't carry oxygen. It can't do its function like it normally would. So that results in sickle cell anemia. White blood cells, we said, were larger than erythrocytes. They have nucleus and appear translucent unless we stain them, so we wouldn't be able to see these without staining. The nuclei of white blood cells will appear blue once stained. So you can see those here. There are a lot of those, and how much larger they are than the red blood cells. White blood cells help to fight infection. Some are phagocytic, meaning they engulf harmful cells that may be in the blood. They engulf infectious pathogens, while others are responsible for adaptive immunity that would develop from being exposed to a pathogen or artificial exposure by vaccination. And finally, platelets. This is the last of the cells in blood. These are not complete cells, but are actually fragments of large cells, and they're only present in bone marrow. When a blood vessel is damaged, the platelets will help to form a plug that seals the vessel and prevents blood from escaping the body, prevents you from bleeding out. Injured tissues will release molecules that stimulate the clotting process, and you may recall this is a form of positive feedback, because as those platelets are distributed to the site of injury, a chemical will be released that will call more platelets to that site. So it's a positive feedback system. So I hope this will help you in identifying and comparing and contrasting the various types of connective tissue. Again, I chose this one because it was the most diverse of the types. Good luck in your studies.